Jai Radha Kalachandji Radha Kalachandji Radhe. Jai Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Radhe. Tiger Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ready to read? So, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 15, verses 41 through 46. Can you start?
Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body, which is made by the order of Supreme Personality of Godhead, to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver, and consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world.
The 10 kinds of air acting within the body are compared to the spokes of the chariot's wheels. The top and bottom of the wheel itself are called religion and irreligion. The living entity in the bodily concept of life is the owner of the chariot. The Vedic mantra Pranava is the bow. The pure living entity himself is the arrow. And the target is the Supreme Being.
That was sound effects for the living entity going to the Lord.
In the conditioned stage, one's conceptions of life are sometimes polluted by passion and ignorance, which are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, madness, false prestige, insults, fault-finding, deception, envy, intolerance, passion, bewilderment, hunger, and sleep. All of these are enemies. Sometimes one's conceptions are also polluted by goodness.
Hare Krishna. As long as one has to accept a material body with its different parts and paraphernalia, which are not fully under one's control, one must have the lotus feet of his superiors, namely his spiritual master and the spiritual master's predecessors. By their mercy, one can sharpen the sword of knowledge, and with the power of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's mercy, one must then conquer the enemies mentioned above. In this way, the devotee should be able to merge into his own transcendental bliss, and then he may give up his body and resume his spiritual identity.
Otherwise, if one does not take shelter of Achyuta and Baladev, then the senses acting as the horses and the intelligence acting as the driver both being prone to material contamination, inattentively bring the body, which acts as the chariot, to the path of senses gratification. When one is thus attracted again by the rogues of Vishaya, eating, sleeping, and meeting the horses and chariot driver are thrown into the blinding dark well of material existence, and one is again put into a dangerous and extremely fearful situation and respected birth and death.
Let's go to
According to the Vedas, there are two kinds of activities, pravriti and nivriti. Pravriti activities involve raising oneself from a lower to a higher condition of materialistic life, whereas nivriti means the cessation of material desire. Through pravriti activities, one suffers from material entanglement, but by nivriti activities, one is purified and becomes fit to enjoy eternal blissful life.
Let's go back to text 41 and read the Sanskrit together. What's the meter here? Ahu shariram ratamindriyani ayan abhishun mana indriyesham Vartmani matra dishanam chasutam Satvam brihadbanduramisha shrishyam. Please chant. Ahu shariram ratamindriyani ayana vishun mana indriyesham Vartmani matra dishanam chasutam Satvam brihadbanduramisha shrishtam Ahu shariram ratamindriyani ayanavishun mana indriyesham Vartmani matra dishanam chasutam Satvam Tvam brihad bandhuramesha shrishtam. Or we can do the synonyms together. Ahu, it is said. Shariram, the body. Ratam, the chariot. Indriyani, the senses. Hayan, the horses. The reins. Manaha, the mind. Indriyaya, of the senses. Isham, the master. Vartmani, the destinations. Matraha, the sense objects. Dishanam, the intelligence. Cha, and. Sutam, the chariot driver. Sattvam, consciousness. Brihat, great. Bandhuram, bondage. Isha, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shrishtam, created. The translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Transcendentalists who are advanced in knowledge compare the body, which is made by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to a chariot. The senses are like the horses. The mind, the master of the senses, is like the reins. The objects of the senses are the destinations. Intelligence is the chariot driver, and consciousness, which spreads throughout the body, is the cause of bondage in this material world. Purport. For a bewildered person in the materialistic way of life, the body, mind, and the senses, which are engaged in sense gratification, are the cause of bondage to repeated birth, death, old age, and disease. But for one who has advanced in spiritual knowledge, the same body, senses, and mind are the causes of liberation. This is confirmed in the Katha Upanishad 1.3 through 4.9 as follows. Atmanam mrittanam vidhi shariram rattam cha buddhim tu sharitam vidhi mana pragraham evacha indriyani hayan ahur vishayam steshu gocharan sodvanaya param apnoti tadvishno paramam padam. The soul is the occupant of the chariot of the body, of which the driver is the intelligence. The mind is the determination to reach the destination. The senses are the horses, and the sense objects are also included in that activity. Thus, one can reach the destination Vishnu, who is Param Padam, the supreme goal of life. In conditioned life, the consciousness in the body is the cause of bondage. But the same consciousness, when transformed into Krishna consciousness, becomes the cause for one's returning home back to Godhead. The human body, therefore, may be used in two ways: for going to the darkest regions of ignorance, or for going forward, back home, back to Godhead. To go back to Godhead, the path is Mahat Seva, to accept the self-realized spiritual master. Mahat Sevam Dvoram Mahor Vimukte. For liberation, one should accept the direction of authorized devotees who can actually endow one with perfect knowledge. On the other hand, Tamo Dvoram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. If one wants to go to the darkest regions of material existence, one may continue to associate with persons who are attached to women. Yoshitam Sangi Sangam. The word Yoshit means woman. Persons who are too materialistic are attached to women. It is said, therefore, Atmanam Rattinim Vidhi Sharidam Vrattamevacha. The body is just like a chariot or car, in which one may go anywhere. One may drive well, or else one may drive whimsically, in which case it is quite possible that he may have an accident and fall into a ditch. In other words, if one takes direction from the experienced spiritual master, one can go back home, back to Godhead. Otherwise, one may return to the cycle of birth and death. Therefore, Krishna personally advises, Ashradadana Purusha Dharmasyasya Parantapa Aprapyamam Nivartanti Mrityu Samsara Vartmani. Those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of foes, but return to birth and death in this material world. Bhagavad Gita 9:3. The Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna personally gives instructions on how one can return home back to Godhead. But if one does not care to listen to his instructions, the result will be that one will never go back to Godhead, but will continue life in this miserable condition of repeated birth and death in material existence. Mrityu samsara vartmani. The advice of experienced transcendentalists, therefore, is that the body be fully engaged for achieving the ultimate goal of life, swartha gatim. The real interest or goal of life is to return home back to Godhead. To enable one to fulfill this purpose, there are so many Vedic literatures, including Vedanta Sutra, the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, and the Ramayana. One should take lessons from these Vedic literatures and learn how to practice Nivritti Marg. Then one's life will be perfect. The body is important as long as it has consciousness. Without consciousness, the body is merely a lump of matter. Therefore, to return home back to Godhead, one must change his consciousness from material consciousness to Krishna consciousness. One's consciousness is the cause of material bondage, but if this consciousness is purified by bhakti yoga, one can then understand the falsity of his upadhi, his designations as Indian, American, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and so on. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tatpadatvena nirmalam. One must forget these designations and use this consciousness only for the service of Krishna. Therefore, if one takes advantage of the Krishna consciousness movement, his life is certainly successful. Now we can chant the Mangala Charana together. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. You know how to put the pictures up from the Bhagavad Gita? This one picture that has this description. So, this picture, you know? Yeah? Yeah. So the verse and purport are pretty clear, right? And this description is so elaborate and scientific, breaking down what are the horses compared to? Kids only can answer. Remember what the horses were compared to? The senses. And the body is a chariot. And the whole description is breaking it down like the reins, the ropes that come from the horses or the senses is the mind. And the driver is the intelligence. And the passenger is the soul. So it's a very elaborate explanation. No big deal if it's... So I have a question. All of us are trying to become Krishna conscious in the different activities of sadhana. What's the first point of spiritual life? Say what you want. Accepting Krishna as God or the Supreme. But in connection, that's the highest actually, and it could be considered, the beginning. But I'm thinking here the first step is to get off the bodily concept of life. No matter what form of spirituality you practice, spirituality means spirit. So the first point is to understand that we're not the material body, but we're the soul. It's okay if it doesn't come naturally. I'll take that Gita back. Yeah, that's the picture there, but... Oh, okay. No problem. Thank you. So this picture, yeah, it's a breakdown of what's being explained here, but when I was thinking about this verse, I was like, explanations are good, but we need practical experience, right? Just like somebody may tell you how to get to the temple here. Like, let's say you're downtown and you ask, have you been to Kalachandji's temple? And somebody may give you directions. Let's say you get on the highway, you go east, whatever it is. You exit at 265, you make a left. But that's just theoretical, or that's just pointing you in the direction. So similarly, this very elaborate and detailed example of what the body is, what the mind is, what intelligence is, what the soul is, what the sense objects are, what's the goal. It's a very detailed, what the spokes of the wheels are, right? It got very detailed. It's just pointing us in the direction to use our intelligence, to use our mind to distinguish what is the difference between the body and who we really are as the conscious spiritual being. So that's why sometimes they say, like, always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. Why do they have to say that part? It's emphasis, right? When you want to say something, it's good to emphasize it. But also, there's positive things and there's negative things. Like right here, it's in the purport, Prabhupada was giving understanding that the body, it can be in a bondage. It can be the source of putting one into more material entanglement, but also it can be used as an instrument for liberating the soul. Just like Prabhupada said, consciousness. Consciousness can be used if it's going away from Krishna. If we're thinking that this whole elaborate system, the body, the chariot, however you want to, see it, is for our enjoyment, then that entangles us more and more into the complicated, Prabhupada says at the end of the purport, miserable realities of birth, death, old age, and disease, right? But the same consciousness, if used for being thoughtful of Krishna and our relationship with Krishna, and to act in devotional service, is the cause of our liberation, right? So the point I was getting at is that to have theoretical knowledge is not enough, right? The Vedas sometimes, like this explanation, elaborate, detailed explanation of how the body is like a chariot, it's good, but ultimately we have to have an experience, have a spiritual experience, right? The soul has to be reawakened. It can't just be told. Somebody else can't tell us, hey, you're not the body, right? But you can, but ultimately, just like Prabhupada says that this, like I always like to use this example of honey. Right? You could have a total scientific breakdown of the constitutional nature of honey. But what it may, you may get intellectually entertained, or you may get some knowledge about it, but if you taste the honey, then okay, this is what honey is on one level, right? So there's different ways. Krishna is coming to us from all, trying to revive our original spiritual awareness from every angle, right? It's said that the 4 Kumaras, they were impersonalists, right? They were fully realized on the spiritual plane, on the Brahman platform. But when they smelled the tulsi, when they smelled the aroma of Krishna's lotus feet, they became attracted to the personal aspect of the absolute truth. Their spirituality got deeper and more perfect. So Krishna came through their nostrils. He reawakened their spiritual desire for personal service through the sense of smell. Now, just like prasadam also, Krishna is non-different from his mercy, the prasadam. So there's so many different stories how people have become attracted and re-inspired to understand their true nature beyond the body by eating, by the mouth. So Krishna comes through the mouth, through the ears, by chanting, and also through the mind and intelligence by philosophy, right? So we have to be convinced on many levels and attracted, ultimately. So the first stage in spiritual life is to theoretically know that I'm not the body, I'm not the mind also, but I'm the soul. That's one level, but it's not enough. Theoretical knowledge is not enough, and also just to know the soul or that the conscious self or the essence of life is not material is not enough. We have to know the whole picture, that the soul is part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Mamevamsha jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manashashtan indriyani prakritishtani karshati, that the living entities in this material world are my eternal parts and parcels. But due to ignorance, they're struggling hard with the 6 senses, which includes the mind. So this has to be understood also theoretically at first, right? That, okay, I'm not the body, I'm the soul. And the soul is part of the Supreme Soul. And then we have to know that what is that relationship? So the personalists in Krishna consciousness, there's bhakti, there's the bhakta, and there's Bhagavan. These three aspects. There's the soul, the super soul, and the eternal loving exchanges, the eternal relationship of devotional service. And this constitutes the spiritual reality. So devotional practices of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, of reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, of serving devotees, of serving the deities. These things are practical reality of the soul. And it happens in different phases, just like you may have a mango, but it may be a green mango. But eventually, or with time, that mango ripens and then it's juicy and sweet. So similarly, we may be doing the exact same things in sadhana bhakti. By practicing devotional service, we may be doing the exact same things that the liberated soul, or that the prema bhaktis, that the pure devotees are doing. Just like we're doing artik, we're dressing the deities, we're cooking for the deities. So Mother Yashoda, she does the same things. Radharani, the gopis, they're also doing kirtan. The cowherd boys, they're doing kirtan. They're playing with Krishna, or dressing Krishna, or thinking how to please Krishna. So the difference is that elevation of devotion and ever increasing spiritual desires to please Krishna. But we have the goal, and we have the means. Sometimes they say the means are the goal, right? So we're doing the same thing. We're singing Hare Krishna, and the gopis are singing Hare Krishna, but a little bit of a difference, at least for me. So I was thinking, one thing is that, like this verse is alluding to, is that we realize that this is a gift from Krishna, this body, and that it's compared to a chariot, and we have to use the senses, the horses, just like they in this example of the chariot and the horses and the senses. I think Vijay, one of the biggest book distributors in the movement, he used to show people this picture. He's probably shown people this picture millions of times and explained. He says, so you see how the horses are the senses of seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, and feeling, and the reins are the mind, the intelligence is the driver. So he says the spiritual wisdom is meant to give guidance to the intelligence, so that the soul or the passenger has a smooth ride and goes to the destination. Just like Prabhupada clearly points out in the verse, how the goal of life is to go back home, back to Godhead. And the chariot and the mind and the senses and everything is meant to go in that direction. But if the senses think, oh, I'm in control, and they go wherever they want, then Vijay would always go, whoa, 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 whoa. You may, like Prabhupada says, you may fall into a ditch if you don't know how to drive. So if the senses do whatever they want, then the destination is repeated birth and death. So we have to get off the bodily concept of life, and this verse is giving us clear understanding of how to use the different aspects of the subtle energies of the mind and the intelligence, and then how to use the senses to use them in the service of Krishna. But one thing is also, just like there's that phrase that humility doesn't mean that you think less of yourself, but you think of yourself less. So to get off the bodily concept of life, one of the biggest things that we're meant to do is to think of Krishna's body. Don't think of our failing, temporary, material body or mind, or different limited desires, or different extended bodily concepts of life, our family, our society. But preoccupy our mental space, use all of it to think of Krishna's body. Because Krishna, when Krishna wakes up, when he is in the material world, what's the first thing he does? Oh yeah, on the altar he honors Mahasweets. And then to show the example of that a ideal household or an ideal human should meditate on the Supreme, he meditates on himself. So for Krishna, he can totally be on the bodily concept of life because his body is Satchidananda. His body is the source of all material and spiritual worlds, right? Aham sarvasya prabhavo matas pravartate iti matva bhajante mam buddha bhava samanvitaha. So Krishna is saying, I'm the source of all spiritual and material worlds. Everything emanates from me. And the wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service. So this is what we do. Instead of, when we chant during japa time, our mind may be thinking, oh, my body's a little tired. Or my mind may be thinking, my feelings were hurt when my friend said this to me, or this and that. But these things we have to try to let, as it comes in, let it go and go back to the body of Krishna. Get on the Krishna bodily concept of life. So the holy name is non-different from Krishna. Nama, Guna, Rupa, Lila. We have to focus on Krishna more and more. That's what the japa session is, to get absorbed in the in the vibration of the holy names, and to get off our manovrat, right? Our manorut. What's that? How do you say that? We're in a rut. No, the chariot of the mind. We ride it, right? Wherever it may go, we're kind of slaves to it. That's what the picture of the passenger in this chariot, when we let the senses do what they want, and the reins aren't in control of the senses, and the intelligence isn't fueled by spiritual philosophy, then the mind can't control the senses, and the passenger is just having a crazy ride in life. So sometimes that's what our mind is. So just like japa is a time to focus in and fill the mind and fill the heart with the vibration of Krishna, then more and more, then it's not just the name, but then it's the rupa, then it's the form. We may think of the form of the Lord, then the guna, the qualities of Krishna, and then ultimately the leelas of the Lord. They may spontaneously and naturally, by Krishna's causeless mercy, appear in our mind, and ultimately will reestablish our loving relationship with the Lord. So I was thinking in along with that, or in that connection, well, first of all, I'll just say a few quick things how, this example of how we're not the body. The prasadam prayers, when we say, the translation? Vaishnava, of the prasadam prayers? Yeah, you do. This body is a lump of ignorance. One time when I went to my family, and usually, religious families, or from whatever tradition, they say grace, or they say a prayer before they eat. So they were like, oh, you're practicing spiritual life. Why don't you say the blessing before we eat? So I was like, okay. And everybody was gathered around the table, and I was like, this body is a lump of ignorance. The senses are a network of paths leading to death. Of all the senses, the tongue is the most voracious and hardest to control. But you are so kind, dear Krishna, that you have given us this Bhagavat Prasadam. So I was thinking, wow. I was like, as I was saying it, I saw the faces of my family. I was like, oh, this is a little bit intense, and graphic, and it's not just like flowery and like, thank you, God, for this food, and thank you for my family, and thank you for, which is good. Everything is, gratitude is the best, but also realistic, philosophical truth is needed, and it's being reinforced again and again. And Prabhupada points it out so clearly. And also, I'd like to say a prayer by Rukmini. Rukmini is one of the queens of Krishna. And here in the chapter 60, it's called Krishna Teases Rukmini. Does everybody remember some of that? When Krishna brought up so many different points why she shouldn't have married him, and he was trying to entice her to get angry, to show, have a lover's quarrel, but her humility, she wouldn't do it. But then after she used everything that he said, she changed the words, because Sanskrit is so intricate. She used the same words, but used those to glorify Krishna and show how he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that anybody and everybody should and has a relationship with him as a lover, as a servant. So listen to her words here. A woman who fails to relish the fragrance of the honey of your lotus feet becomes totally befooled. And thus she accepts as her husband or lover a living corpse, covered with skin, whiskers, nails, head hair, and body hair, and filled with flesh, bones, blood, parasites, feces, mucus, bile, and air. Nitai Gaur Premanandi. So, she was the topmost lover of the Lord. I mean, she's one of the wives of Krishna, but here she's giving a philosophical breakdown of the reality, right? So that was on one side. Just like I was saying, there's always the positive and the negative. There's things that we shouldn't do in Krishna consciousness, and there's things we should do in Krishna consciousness. So the things that we shouldn't do are sense gratification, and to think of our bodies and just try to cater to the bodily demands or the extended bodily needs of our family, our society. But the positive things we should do is think of Krishna's body, serve Krishna's body. Just like they say in deity worship, Prabhupada would say that if you decorate the Lord nicely, then your soul becomes decorated. That your desire to want to look pretty or dress yourself up becomes satisfied by dressing Krishna beautifully and decorating him beautifully. So in that regard, I was thinking that Krishna's lotus feet, right? There's so many different markings on Krishna's lotus feet. Do you know how many by chance, anybody? I don't. You know some? You can think of some in your mind. The soles of the Lord's lotus feet are marked with Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, conch shell, disc, club, and lotus, and also by a flag and a thunderbolt. When Krishna walks on this earth or in the heavenly planets, these marks are visible wherever he goes. Vrindavan Dham is a transcendental place because of Krishna's walking on this land frequently. The inhabitants of Vrindavan were fortunate to see these marks here and there. When Akrura went to Vrindavan to take Krishna and Balaram away to the festival arranged by Kamsa, upon seeing the marks of the Lord's lotus feet on the ground of Vrindavan, he fell down and began to groan. These marks are visible to devotees who receive the causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The demigods were jubilant not only because the appearance of the Supreme Lord would do away with the burdensome demons, but also because they would be able to see upon the ground the transcendental marks from the soles of the Lord's lotus feet. The gopis always thought of the Lord's lotus feet. When he was walking in the pasturing grounds, and as described in the previous verse, simply by thinking of the Lord's lotus feet, the gopis were fully absorbed in transcendence. Like the gopis, one who is always absorbed in thought of the Lord is beyond the material platform and will not remain in this material world. It is our duty, therefore, always to hear, chant, and think about the Lord's lotus feet, as actually done by the Vaishnavas who have decided to live in Vrindavan always and think of the Lord's lotus feet 24 hours. So this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 2, text 38, purport. So so that is the whole goal, to more and more get absorbed in Krishna's form and Krishna's body and Krishna's pastimes and Krishna's service and Krishna's qualities. And that's what Srimad Bhagavatam is, that our minds, we can use our minds to be absorbed, and our intelligence, and to understand things as best as possible by Krishna's grace philosophically, and come more and more closer to service to Radha Kalachandji. Thank you for your time and attention. Any reflections or questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for a very nice class. To be meditated on, like, oh, she's bringing up Krishna's lotus feet. I was also trying to remember. So you said Shankha Chakra, Gada Padma, lightning, and what was the other one? Flag. Are there more, or these are the ones?
Yeah. You can look it up.
Oh yeah.
There's
Oh, that's beautiful. So these are
the devotees, or the inhabitants of Vrindavan, when Krishna would walk through the forest, his footprints would make imprints in the sand, and everybody made a pact. It was like an unspoken devotional agreement, just out of love. They would never step where Krishna stepped, so that they could always see them. One time, you go ahead.
No, that was all I was saying. That's such a beautiful meditation, to go looking for Krishna's.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? We're always told we should be Krishna conscious, but none of us really know. None of us have the marks memorized, or, I mean, that also, just like I was saying, it's also not just because you may have a intellectual or academic brain, and you may be able to memorize. There's scholars of Krishna's pastimes that aren't devotees. So it's not necessarily, tantamount that you're more Krishna conscious, that you can memorize something. But it would be nice for all of us to, instead of asking somebody, go up to somebody, hey, how's the weather? How's your dog? That's fine to be personal too, but we could say, guess what? I memorized the right lotus foot of Krishna, the symbols, and the symbols represent this, this, and this.
I was thinking along the same lines of how Krishna's footprints stayed visible whenever he was walking. I was kind of thinking, like, how is that even possible? Like you walk and then your footprint just stays there. But I was, this is just my wondering if, like, the earth is kind of like wanting to keep the form of those footprints. That is a little speculation, but it's just beautiful to think of the fact that he walks and those footprints stay there. They don't go away, and the devotees don't walk on them. And the
sometimes also I've heard it said that wherever Krishna steps, flowers automatically bloom. I think that's another poetic way of just sharing the magic of Krishna's.
Yeah. And then you were saying Manaratam, chariot of the mind. I was really appreciating that you can't give something up, or it's hard to give something up unless you have something to replace it with. And instead of meditating on our mind and our senses, we can shift that meditation to the form of the Lord, to the body of the Lord, to the pastimes of the Lord. I was thinking that's such a nice shift.
So I think Prabhupada, he perfectly understood the psychophysical nature of his student, his disciples. So he gave absorbing service accordingly. It's like sometimes they say, Prabhupada said, actually the only thing you need to do is chant the Mahamantra. But I've given you all these things to keep you occupied, because, but yeah. So like Prabhupada understanding that's the service of the spiritual master, is to properly engage his disciples fully. Like Prabhupada gave that, what they called impossible task of doing the Chaitanya Charitamrita, finishing it in a certain amount of months, because he knew, okay, my disciples, they need to be like pushed, overly maxed, overly absorbed. Like if you hear the devotees tell about how they did that, there was Prabhupada made an arrangement that there was no space for anything to enter their minds, but how can I do this service in 2 months? And it wasn't just one person. He had a whole community. And then Prabhupada's, that's the goal of complete absorption, so that that's what love is. Love is when you're so absorbed in the other person that you don't think of yourself. It's just, that's bliss. So Prabhupada is coming up with so many things we should, if we're not forced by our gurus, in a sense, we have to realize how to put ourselves in, I'm speaking to myself, in situations where we're more absorbed. That spiritual life is a question of absorption. And then when the service is like, one thing Prabhupada said in a purport was, the best way to control the mind is to be constantly thinking of how to do good to others. So that's like, what outreach is, what distributing of books, organizing community temple programs, that we're always thinking, how can somebody get a taste in Krishna consciousness? Not somebody, how can masses,
Chaitanya Prabhu shared on that same pastime you're talking about, when Prabhupada engaged them in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the devotees were painting, and sometimes they would fall asleep painting. And then the next devotee would come and take up where they left off. So multiple devotees were painting the same picture. They would continue it, so it just never stopped. Unbelievable. I was also, the text 43 through 44, it lists so many things that I experience. This whole list of, in the conditioned stage, one's conception of life are sometimes polluted by passion, ignorance, and are exhibited by attachment, hostility, greed, lamentation, illusion, fear, and this whole list. And then at the end, and then it says, sometimes one's conceptions are also polluted by goodness. I found that to be quite interesting.
We long for that. We long for that
that contamination.
Yeah. Just like that devotee who, I think it was Mathura Priya was asking, who did he ask? He was like saying to one guru, Kalakanta Prabhu, yeah, he had him at his house for prasadam, so he asked, I'm mainly in the mode of ignorance, so to get to the mode of goodness, that seems very hard. Should I aspire to at least get to the mode of passion? Or can I work towards that? He said, no, just try, be in the mode of goodness, he said. Anything else? Well, let me read this, because there's one last thing that's nice here. Last little absorption in Krishna consciousness. So, Akrura then saw Krishna and Balaram in the village of Braj, going to milk the cows. Krishna wore yellow garments, Balaram blue, and their eyes resembled autumnal lotuses. I guess when you're expert at knowing what goes on in Vrindavan, there's different kinds of lotuses at different seasons. So their eyes resembled autumnal lotuses. One of those mighty armed youths The shelter of the goddess of fortune had a dark blue complexion, and the other's was white. With their fine-featured faces, they were the most beautiful of all persons, as they walked with the gait of young elephants, glancing about with compassionate smiles. Those two exalted personalities beautified the cow pastures with the impressions of their feet, which bore the marks of the flag, lightning bolt, elephant goad, and lotus. The two lords, whose pastimes are most magnanimous and attractive, were ornamented with jeweled necklaces and flower garlands, anointed with auspicious fragrant substances, freshly bathed and dressed in spotless raiment. They were the primeval supreme personalities, the masters and original causes of the universes, who had for the welfare of the earth now descended in their distinct forms of Keshava and Balaram. O King Parikshit, they resembled two gold-bedecked mountains, one of emerald and the other of silver, as with their effulgence they dispelled the sky's darkness in all directions. That's from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:38, text 28 through 33. So thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.